Welcome to another episode of the LinguaBees podcast. We are thrilled and feel lucky to have an outstanding scholar with us today. Allow me to introduce Dr. Krisztina Zimányi, who is a full-time associate professor at the Department of Languages at the University of Guanajuato in Mexico, where she lectures on psycholinguistics, translation, and translation studies, among other subjects. Her research interests include conceptualizations of translation as a phenomenon, in particular, intersemiotic translation and collaborative translation, translator education, and translator ethics. Dr. Zimányi graduated from the University of Budapest, then completed her postgraduate studies at the University of Dublin, Trinity College, and Dublin City University. Her academic training includes an MA in English Language and Literature with teacher training for secondary school, an MA in Anglo-Irish Literature, an MA in Translation Studies with a postgraduate diploma in Applied Linguistics and Intercultural Studies, as well as a PhD in Translation and Interpretation Studies. Dr. Zimányi is recognized as a Level 1 researcher in the Sistema Nacional de Investigadoras e Investigadores and holds a desirable profile in PRODEP. Welcome, Dr. Krisztina, and thank you for sparing some time out of your busy schedule to be with us.
Well, thank you, Ariana. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here.
Would like to start this conversation with some questions about your coming to Mexico. Could you tell us about your transition from your hometown in Budapest to Dublin and finally Mexico?
Sure. So as you mentioned, I did my first degree in Budapest. And then during that time, actually, ever since I was in secondary school, I visited Ireland quite frequently, so it was quite a natural move for me to end up in Dublin, first as an MA student at Trinity College. And after finishing that degree, I wasn't sure what I was going to do with my life. So I ended up working for a company that had absolutely nothing to do with what I'm doing now. And it was a computer software company that validated and verified software for the European Space Agency.
Wow.
Yeah, very, very different. Obviously, I wasn't a computer engineer or anything. I was just an admin. And then I kept looking for like what I really wanted to do with my life. And first I thought maybe I would go into journalism. And I did some diplomas in journalism, and I also applied and was accepted at an MA in journalism. And I thought, no, not really. It's not for me. Actually, I got through to the interview stage, and then it was quite clear for the interviewers, whom later on I got to know quite well, and myself, that no, it wasn't a match made in heaven. So I realized that at the same university, which was DCU, there was a grad diploma in applied language and intercultural studies, and I thought, okay, this is it. So I did my third MA with the idea of finding a topic for a PhD, and that's how I finished in DCU. So when I did my PhD, basically, there was a financial crisis in various countries in Europe. Ireland was badly affected, so I didn't have a job, and I thought, okay, where shall I go? And I ended up in Madrid first, and in Madrid, I was teaching English. I went back to teaching English. I kept publishing as much as I could. And then there I met my now husband, who is from Guanajuato. So we ended up in Mexico, and that's how basically that was kind of a circuitous route to get to Mexico, and that's how I'm here.
Wow, it's so interesting to find out that love brought you to Mexico, and then you fell in love with Mexico, right?
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, it wasn't easy at first. It was quite an adjustment process, but I think it, you know, every time I moved countries, it was an adjustment process. So Mexico wasn't any different in that sense. Mhm.
Wow, well, we're thrilled that you are here in Mexico because we have the opportunity to talk to you. We have from your profile, we've learned that you major in English language and literature and did a PhD in translation. So when and how did your interest in translation begin?
Actually, during that first degree in teaching English and English language and literature, I did take classes in literary translation. I was hell-bent on becoming a literary translator for a while. And then it kind of fell by the wayside because I needed to basically support myself and earn enough money to survive. And literary translation is not exactly an area that you know, you can live on very easily.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was in Ireland and I went back to studying after being with the company, this is one of the ways, again, that I could support myself, not from literary translation, but I worked through various agencies and for various agencies also in admin. And I think that's when I realized, okay, this is something that I'm really interested in. I ended up working on community interpreting in particular. And when I came to Mexico, when I arrived in Mexico, I had started learning Spanish quite late when I arrived in Madrid. So my Spanish like wasn't, you know, that strong at the time. But uh, I had a very strong interest in translation at that stage. So I kept kind of at it. And within the university, although it's not like a full BA program, but I mean, we do have translation classes, introductory classes to translation. So I could continue kind of with that interest, and everything else that came after is basically that's the origin.
Yes. Well, it sounds amazing. I think and very interesting to me personally, and it is very inspiring as well that you started translating as a source of to get an income, right? As you mentioned, but at the same time, we're able to find it the love for it as well, and it's truly inspiring how you moved to Mexico and you adjusted to your circumstances and learn a new language that we know for a fact that Spanish is not an easy language to learn. So it's truly inspiring that to know that you've done that. And if you could do it, then a lot of other people could do it as well, right?
I definitely think so. And just one thing, I think it's really important that a lot of us, I mean, in the area of English teaching as well, a lot of us do it for a living. We shouldn't kind of be shy away from that fact that this is a source of income, this is work. And everything else on top of that, the luxury of being able to research on the subject, it's just added plus. But I don't think we should be hypocritical about it. And, you know,
Mhm.
it is a source of income.
Right. Of course, of course. I mean, we all major in some kind of area, and the final, goal is also to have an income from the future, not like to start building each other's future. Okay, so from your published research, we learned that it evaluates different phenomena, combining literature, language, applied linguistics, and translation, especially in the Mexican context. So there are two questions that I'd like to ask. The first one being, how would you describe your research experience in Mexico in general?
Well, I've been lucky enough, I think, because I could actually dedicate time and effort to areas of research that are completely sometimes off the cuff. Um, and I could continue researching translation. So I had a history teacher in my secondary school, and we're still in touch. So that's kind of a long friendship, or now it's a friendship. And I remember he once told me, you know, nobody should stop you from researching whatever you really are interested in.
Right.
So, you know, sometimes on the other hand, and this is really important, when you do research, you have to be rigorous. So it's not just like, oh, I like this topic, and then suddenly I become an expert. No, that's not the case. It's a lot of work. But at the same time, my research in the area of translation or pedagogical translation, which is basically the application of translation in language teaching, has been very varied for the same reason. And some people might see that as a weakness, you know, that you do not dedicate yourself to the exact same subject for maybe years or decades. There is truth to that as well. As I say, you need to be very careful and very rigorous in your research. But at the same time, I think I feel very lucky that I haven't had to specialize completely. I'm not an audiovisual translation person, for example, and my research is more and more geared towards teaching translation, specifically reflective practice in translation, which is something I have, you know, learned in English teaching. So it's kind of nice how these two areas keep intertwining.
Right. So an important point that you're mentioning is that some researchers don't stay in the same topic or area of research, as you mentioned. But I find that as a strength, as opposed to as a weakness, because in the area of applied linguistics, in this case, and for the major that we are studying at the Departamento de Lenguas, I think that is the benefit that we have, that you don't specialize in one topic only, and you are able to explore more areas and broaden your view and your vision on both linguistics and teaching and in the world in general, right? So I think that I don't know, it was curious that you mentioned it as a weakness, and I personally think it as a strength. So do you have fun when researching different topics? I mean, because that's the main point, right? Like not having only one thing, but trying to spread your knowledge in many areas.
Sometimes it's difficult, I think, because you do need to dig deep. You do need to deepen your understanding of certain areas, but there are points of commonalities, or there is common ground, or sometimes you know, knowledge, competences, skills that you've acquired in one area could serve in another, especially if you can't continue with your line of research. So in my case, I did my PhD on community interpreting for immigrants in mental health care, and obviously that I couldn't, I mean, I love community interpreting, but it's not something that I have been particularly involved in Mexico, because I haven't had a chance. I think I would need, for example, one area, well, two areas that are very interesting. One is for sign languages, and another one for indigenous or original language speakers. But I don't speak indigenous languages, and it's quite difficult. I think there is a very good scholar who works with indigenous languages, but I think personally I would feel more comfortable in knowing it, yeah. But having said that, for example, one area where I could bring my previous knowledge into language teaching was when I was looking at how teachers use their L1 and the target language, so the mother tongue or the student's mother tongue, and the language that they are teaching in the classroom, and used an interpreting framework to kind of categorize the way we do that, or the way the teachers do that. No, and I think, you know, it's valid to bring certain constructs or structures or knowledge from one area to another. I think it's quite enriching.
Right. I have another question here. You've have a variety of research projects throughout your career. Is there, and it's understandable that every researcher and every project is valuable for scholars in particular. However, is there any project that you would say you have enjoyed the most working in?
Yeah, well, I think I have two.
Oh.
I have a few projects that I have very fond memories of, but one of them, which I did completely on my own, and it was one of those projects that I just said, you know, if you're interested in something, just do it. And it was how to read the imagery of La Malinche as an interpreter and her position in certain kind of spaces and visual representations, which took me to appreciate like wonderful pieces of artwork. So I love that. That was wonderful. And I wish I could have continued with that in literature and in other areas. And another one is a current project that I'm doing. I had done translation projects, like collaborative voluntary translation project with students, but the current one is just exploded from like a very small idea. And I've been working with 6 wonderful ladies, young women who are students or ex-students. And I think that's one of my favorite projects to date.
Mhm. And it's interesting that you mentioned that because that was actually one of the following questions. Can you tell us a little bit about this project that you're working on with student participation?
Sure. It has to do with a series of articles that were written based on talks that were given on femicide. And in English, it's femicide for a particular reason. One of the key authors in the area, Diana Russell, insisted, coined this term and preferred it for various reasons to using feminicide. Yeah. So when we started doing the translation, and it grew out of what is called the Servicio Social, at public universities in Mexico, students have to contribute to society. And they've asked me, some students asked me if there was anything to translate, and we ended up doing this translation, and it's been going on for years, like literally for years now. And I think we're at revision number 4 at this stage, group revision, because that's how we work. But essentially, one of the difficulties is exactly the terminology between deciding if we should translate it as femicidio or feminicidio. And this might sound completely crackers, but it's actually not such an easy decision.
Right. Well, we're very interested about this project that you're working in particular because of the title, right? This topic is a bit controversial in society in general, not only in Mexico, but I think it's a controversial topic around the world. And it's pretty interesting that you mentioned that this project exploded from a very tiny idea. So what would you say inspired you, or what was this tiny idea that you mentioned that led to such a project that includes students at the same time?
Well, it was student-led. So it came from their idea, and then we were looking for texts. Then we were actually asked to translate a particular article by Diana Russell to Spanish. And while we were doing that, we discovered through various routes that the term itself is controversial. And as you say, you know, the topic is not exactly, it's not cheerful by any means, but it is a very important issue. And it's not just Mexico. I mean, I think the Mexican reality, both you and I know that it's very heavily imbued with problems of domestic violence, and including feminicide and or femicide, sorry, violence in general. But unfortunately, this topic, as we have discovered from the articles themselves, it's not particular to Mexico. No, unfortunately, there are a lot of countries and a lot of regions in the world where this crime happens quite a lot. So it is a way, I think, to to share that information, although at this stage the information is not completely up to date. Unfortunately, again, it hasn't changed that much in any of the regions where the articles hail from. But share that information and legislation, statistics, etc., with a Spanish-speaking audience. Specifically, we are trying to translate for a Mexican audience, and that's where the feminicidio comes in, because this version of the word is more accepted and it's more widely used in Mexico.
Right. So you mentioned that it was student-led then, right? But there are a lot of students here as part of the project. We noticed that there is diversity in majors among the students participating. And to make it a little bit clearer, there are students with different BAs, right? There are BA students, graduates. And we have someone from teaching Spanish as a second language. We have someone from English language teaching, and we have some other from Spanish literature. So did you carry any selection process, or were these students the ones who approached you to have this project be done?
It's quite organic the way it evolved, actually. So there was a small group of students at the beginning who they're all together. There are six of them. Some of them had known each other and then called each other from the same BA, specifically teaching English. So as their major isn't in translation, but they do have or did have 1 or 2 classes in translation, introductory classes. Some of them have completed a diploma course, a 150-hour diploma course in translation, etc., etc. So they came along. All of the young women came along somehow over the course of the last 2.5 years, and asked me if I had something to do, some translation work that was going on. And when I mentioned this, they were like, okay, I'd love to join. And in terms of their backgrounds, I think it was really important, because some of them, those who were doing the BA in English teaching, their sensitivity to the source text was higher, while obviously the students who were studying or who are studying the BA in teaching Spanish as a second language or the BA in Spanish letters, they can contribute more to the production and the target text production and revision. So I think actually one of the students also has some experience in law, like studied law. So that was also interesting, because her input in terms of the legislation and revising the legislation, etc., has also helped a lot. So I think that's where you see the strength of collaborative translation processes.
Right. And this particular project is using group dynamics, right? So I suppose that all of this diversity that you're mentioning, we only knew about their majors, but we didn't know about the extended knowledge that they have in other areas, which is quite interesting for the following question. During this process of deconstructing the word feminicidio in Spanish, or femicidio, were there any struggles, divided opinions, controversy among the team in general?
Yes. In short, yes. We actually had okay, so we started with the idea that it should be femicidio, because in English there is an insistence for ideological reasons on this word, yeah. And then we thought, okay, but we're in a Mexican context, so here in Mexico, feminicidio is used. So as we went along, we kind of kept between the two options, and once we had finished translating all the articles, we had a vote, but the vote was a conversation that went on for 2.5 hours, and then we had a vote. The good thing that I didn't participate in the voting, so that was very fortunate. And we kind of agreed that, when we, in the case of the article that was written by Diana Russell herself, we will keep femicidio because that's her wish. That was very explicit. And in the other cases, we will use feminicidio. However, it's really interesting because the conversation continues like 2.5 years on, not 2.5 hours on. And we will eventually, if we want to publish this, we will need to contact the original authors for their permission to be published in a different language. And I think we will ask them, which one do you prefer? Because there are some, there is an article, for example, from Chile, and in Chile they use femicidio, so it wouldn't be kind of, maybe it might be an imposition on our part. So we kind of decided, yeah, maybe we'll just ask the authors, like, presenting our the two sides of the same coin of the argument, and see what they decide. I think that's what's going to be. So in a prologue to the edition, we will probably have to explain all of that.
And you mentioned two main authors from the use of this word, right? Diana Russell, but also Marcela Lagarde. This is just a question for the future, just an imaginary situation. What if both of them disagree on the terms that you would use? I mean, if you're translating Diana Russell's word into Spanish, and her wish is to use femicidio, but Marcela Lagarde kind of wants feminicidio, how can translators work on that? What will be the resolution to that?
Well, as a translator, you have to make decisions. When you're in a position to enter into conversation with the authors, I think it's a very fortuitous moment. Sadly, Diana Russell passed away a couple of years ago. However, Marcela Lagarde, of course, is still with us. And I don't think you know this, because this happened later, but Marcela Lagarde, la doctora, she gave a talk at the University of Guanajuato twice. Once in 2022, and it was online, and the second time she came in person, and that was about a couple of months ago. So unfortunately, I wasn't in Guanajuato at the time and couldn't meet her. However, 3 of the translators, the young ladies, did have a chance to meet her, and she was very generous with her time. So actually, I think we will have some communication with her once we only have like 2 more articles to revise and ask her, but I think she would vote for feminicide. So I think definitely feminicidio in Spanish. They, of course, were collaborators, Diana Russell and Marcela Lagarde, and Marcela Lagarde was actually Diana Russell's translator. So I think they had a very close working relationship, and I don't think we would be committing, or disrespecting either of their wishes. So we're trying to make sure it's difficult to keep everyone happy, I think, at the same time. And it seems to be like, oh my God, it's just a syllable. Like, what's the point? But a lot of people have very strong views because of the subject. It's like so heavy.
Exactly. So in this case, the following question was supposed to be, what's the conclusion and which word should be used? But I think you have pretty much summarized and explained that. And it only shows also the magnitude of the work of a translator, because as you mentioned, as a translator, we need to make decisions, but at the same time, you need to take into consideration those who you are translating from. And I think that is a very valuable lesson for all future researchers and people who is interested in translating in general. So the following question would be more onto the type of conversations that you're having, the meetings that you have with the team. Are they fully online? Do you meet once in a while in person? How is this working environment done?
I think because we started during the pandemic, so everything is mostly online. We've met a couple of times, but only for social purposes. Like in person, we keep working online. And it used to be once a week on Friday mornings. Then we had a big gap when we didn't work for a while. Then we kind of took it up again and kept meeting on Friday evenings. However, some of us have classes at that time now, so we're trying to meet whenever we can, basically. And it's very interesting because we thought one of our basic interests was like, if I, as a teacher, kind of influence the way things work out. But I think there is one person without whom we practically haven't had a session, and that's not me. That's one of the young ladies. I'm just going to say her name for the moment, her nickname, and everybody knows who she is, who knows her. Darks, she's called, and in case she doesn't agree to be named by other means. But yeah, so basically I think she is the cornerstone of this project at this stage. So whenever she's there, we meet, and very often when she's not there, we somehow weasel out of the meetings and wait until she's actually there. So that also shows, how this is not a translation project where you have like linear or hierarchical structures where there's a project manager, or not like in manga translation, you have a very linear kind of way of working. It's not like that. It is literally a team effort. And it's I think that's why I like it so much.
Thank you for the explanation as well. And Darks, if you're listening to us,
she knows who she is.
Okay. Well, talking about feminism, and in this case, feminist translation, we know that and we've mentioned it before, that it's a controversial topic to some people, to most people. Is there any personal stance on your behalf on having to even have a conversation about this topic in particular, as well as conducting research about the appropriate translation from one language to another?
Oh boy. Yes. And this is really interesting also in the group, because some of the students have always had a much stronger kind of posture, ideological posture on the subject, and joined the project because they were feminists. And I think obviously all of us are women, not, and there was no particular reason. This is how it evolved. There is no exclusion if somebody would want to join, and as a man or would want to join, they're welcome. It's just, I think there's a natural interest maybe, and a social sensitivity among the group. But there are various degrees of beliefs, or various degrees of conviction on the subject, or various degrees of involvement in feminist issues. Not all of us are what a negative discourse would call staunch feminists, but we all have a particular sensitivity towards the subject, and I think it's very difficult not to have sensitivity in our context. Exactly for what we've mentioned before, that this kind of violence, unfortunately, is very prevalent in Mexico in our context. So, kind of turning a blind eye is just not an option. So I think that's where we stand on the subject.
Right. Well, it's as you mentioned, I also share that point that it's impossible not to have some sort of sensitivity towards the topic, whether you really believe in what you're doing at the moment or in feminist theories or if you care about social issues in general. I think it's for everyone. I would say it's difficult not to or to separate from that, no, like that kind of feeling, especially here in Mexico. From the translation strategies, as we close on our session today, from these translation strategies that you implemented in your study, what would you recommend to those interested in this field, in this translation field?
Hmm. It's quite like an interesting topic, you know, because I think when we talk about like feminist theories of translation, it's more an overarching idea that you may consider translation as activism, or you choose certain topics, or you look at, you know, where you translate from, into what languages, from what languages, what information you make available to people. In terms of strategies, I have to say, like we did look at this. We haven't found particular strategies that we could say that are feminist. And I think this is also really important, that we can't be blinded by our beliefs when we do research. We have to take a step back and see, okay, in some areas or some contexts, or from some factors or aspects, it is, you know, it is what it is, but from other elements or components may not work that well. So, and there are actually, you know, authors like Arrojo, for example, who says, okay, what are those particular strategies that are feminist? So you might argue that, you know, you're trying to make things more transparent, etc., etc. But in terms of strategies, we couldn't find anything that would go against kind of the norm, or would upset like the number of or the proportion of strategies that we use compared to other texts. So it's more, I think, the choice of topic, the way we work, definitely, that it's quite, as I said, like it's not very hierarchical, which could be considered definitely as not like a usual triangle hierarchical, more patriarchal way of working. But strategies as such, I think we just kind of use any available strategies to us, from modulation, transposition, of course, some very clear we didn't use, for example, coining. We are using certain préstamos, so borrowings, etc., etc., but nothing particularly that would say, okay, this is the feminist translation strategy.
Right, thank you. And just as a bit of information for our audience and the public in general, where can we all get a copy of your studies?
Well, we are really hoping I think there are a couple of videos floating around in YouTube, because we presented at conferences during the pandemic and we uploaded them. So one of them is the Foro de Estudios de Lenguas, FEL, where you can find it from, I think, 2021. And we're really hoping that the first kind of article chapter will come out in an ebook. So keep tuned. And we are hoping to write more, which is more about like kind of a bricolage, the way we looked at the topic from different perspectives. And we're hoping to do, we're hoping to publish rather an article from a discourse analysis point of view of how our interaction evolved during these conversations that we actually recorded as like real nerds. So that, you know, that we'll see, but we have something in mind. So again, we'll keep you posted.
Yes, all right. Well, we're excited that there is something out there already that we can go and watch, because this topic is extremely interesting And we can only wish you all the best, and that all of your projects in either articles, chapters, more conferences are as successful as I'm sure the project is being. And we would like to thank you once again, Dr. Krisztina, for being here with us and taking the time to share about your research, your, in plural, right, the team research, and your most recent work, and to share about yourself at the same time, for also continuing the conversation in the field of applied linguistics on important social issues like this one, and for being an outstanding representative of women in science. Your journey is definitely inspiring. So thank you so much for joining us on this episode.
Thank you. I don't know what you can see, but thank you very much. I just feel like I'm one of those women who is tugging along, and I think there are a lot of wonderful women in our area. So I think they all deserve a big round of applause. And thank you very much for inviting me.
And thank you to the audience for tuning in and for your continued support. For more information on where to find us, we've left the details in the description box. Don't forget to like and subscribe to all our platforms, and we'll see you in the next episode. Bye.
Bye.